Hello, everybody. My name is Jarrett Burton. I'm the coordinator of the DuPage Recovery-Oriented System of Care program, and I am here to give you a short training on Narcan for reversing opioid overdoses. If this is your first time taking this training, this is a good primer on how to reverse an overdose. And if you've been trained before, this will be a nice brush up because we also talk about some trends and other things that are happening in our area. So let's get started. First thing, it's important to note what are opioids because these are the substances that we will be reversing from an overdose. So opioids belong to a group of drugs that we call depressants. They're primarily used to relieve pain. They obviously can be illicit or obtained through a healthcare professional. The opioids produce this feeling of euphoria, relaxation, also creates a very high potential for them to be misused. Important also, both the legal and the illegal opioids definitely have the potential to cause addiction and overdose. So it's not just about what people are finding on the street, it's also about what people are getting from their doctors. What are some commonly used opioids? Now we have a wide range here to choose from, and if you're watching this recording, you can pause it and take a look at some of those. But all of these are going to have a very similar effect to varying degrees of strength. So you have everything on here from heroin to more common things like codeine, which shows up in Tylenol 3. A lot of people hear that phrase Tylenol 3. They have no idea that there's codeine in it. But you can also see some of these other prescription opioids, but then also some of this newer stuff that's showing up too. If you look over here, things like Kratom and then 7-O, which is the new one that's kind of hitting pretty heavily right now. But you can see there's a wide range of stuff here. It's not just about fentanyl or heroin. What is Narcan? If you're unfamiliar, the active ingredient is also known as naloxone. So that's the medicine that's going to rapidly reverse that overdose. It's an antagonist, which means it is going to attach to the opioid receptors and then block or reverse the effects of other opioids. Important to note that the naloxone is not going to flush your system. The amount of opiates are still in that person's system. It just temporarily blocks it anywhere between 30 and 90 minutes, depending on the person's body chemistry, but also how much they took. It attaches those receptors and blocks things. It can restore the normal breathing to a person if their breathing has slowed or stopped because of an opioid overdose. And ultimately, that's what kills people in overdoses. It depresses the central nervous system to the point where the breathing slows way down and then eventually stops. Narcan has no effect on someone who does not have opioids in their system, so it's pretty harmless if you do not have it in your system. And then that blocking, like we said, typically lasts between 30 and 90 minutes. The most common delivery system of Narcan, and I'll hopefully get this on camera here, is this little nasal spray. This is FDA approved, and each box of Narcan contains usually two of these. So these are one and done, meaning you use it once, it can dispose of it. Each dose contains about 4 milligrams of naloxone. This stuff should be stored in the Goldilocks zone, so that's between 32 and 78 degrees Fahrenheit. If it gets to a low enough temperature, the medication inside this can freeze. It can be thawed out and still have efficacy. Where you need to be careful is on the higher temperature ranges. If you get storing it somewhere like in the glove compartment of your car over the summer, in time that can dissolve the medication in here. So we need to be careful about how we're storing it. There is an expiration date on the bottom of each box of Narcan. Usually has a couple of years, depending on the rotation and where you're getting it at. But even if it's past the expiration date on the bottom, it still has some efficacy for up to 6 months after that date. So better safe than sorry. If it has a little expiration, you can still try it. Narcan is available for free through most harm reduction organizations, but as we'll talk about a little bit later, it's also available through pharmacies as well as over the counter. How to recognize the signs of an overdose. Important to remember this acronym for blue. So that's going to stand for B, which is the breathing. So we're going to be looking at the breathing. Is it erratic? Is it a shallow, gurgling sound coming from the diaphragm, or is it just completely absent? L is for lips. We're going to look for the lips and fingertips. There's going to be kind of a change in the color. So the lips and fingertips might be either blue or gray, and that's specifically due to the decreased oxygenation in the bloodstream. U stands for unresponsive. A person will not respond to verbal or physical stimulation. And then we also look for the eyes, and that's E. So the pupils are going to be almost like a pinpoint, as opioids constrict our pupils to a very, very unusually small size. So remember that acronym BLUE, breathing, lips, unresponsive, and eyes. So how do we check for a response? So step one, we always try to stimulate them awake verbally. So if we know their name, we're going to try and yell their name. If we don't know their name, sir, madam, whatever works to try to get that verbal response. If you're not getting a verbal response, we might want to look at the first nonverbal, which is kind of like a light shoulder shake. We don't want to be, violence or anything when we're doing the nonverbals, but I found that sometimes a stiff shoulder shake can kind of get people to come out of it if it's a low overdose. Step three, if we're not getting the shoulder shake response, we want to try the sternum rub. So if you can do this here at home watching this recording, if you make a fist with your knuckles sticking out like that, take your knuckle and find the spot on your chest where your sternum is going to meet your diaphragm. Right in that spot right there is a big old bundle of nerves. And if you're able to press down in a kind of a circular motion, pressing down hard, that can sometimes be enough, hitting that bundle of nerves to bring people out of the overdose. So we call that the sternum rub. If we get to step four, verbal and physical stuff is just not getting a response, we know that it's probably time to administer that Narcan. Step five is actually a step that you could kind of put in here depending on your where you're at, where the person might be at in an overdose. We want to get 911 on the phone, let them know that we suspect someone is overdosed. If you're carrying Narcan with you, you can let them know. Occasionally, they may ask you, depending on reaction time, to perform CPR if somebody is not breathing, but that usually EMTs are able to get there before you get asked to do something like that. How to administer the Narcan. Take a look at that dummy over there. You want to lay that person on their back if possible. We know that's not always the case if you just have one person and the other person who overdose is much larger. It can be difficult to kind of rearrange them. We understand. So if they're sitting, we just want to make sure that their head is tilted back, right? We want to make sure that their neck is getting some support. These little nasal sprays come in a blister pack. So we want to make sure we get that out of the pack. And then we are going to insert the nozzle into one nostril and push the plunger. So the way that this medication works, it actually gets absorbed through the sinuses, meaning that this person does not have to be breathing for this medication to work. As long as we get it up the nostril and you don't have to jam it all the way in, you can go about half of this nozzle right here and plunge it. So like you said, it's a one-time use only. So once you plunge it, we can get rid of it. If there's no response within a couple of minutes, and when we talk about response, we want to see if the breathing is getting better, if the person's able to kind of come to consciousness. If there is no change in any of that stuff that you found within 2 to 3 minutes, we want to administer a second dose to the other nostril and then repeat as needed. Nowadays, with the advent of stronger synthetic opioids, we are finding that there is a need for multiple doses of Narcan. So don't think just with one that you're out of the woods. Sometimes it's multiples you have to do. So that's kind of the criteria for what we're looking for. What do we do after we administer the Narcan? So if the person's breathing does start to improve, but maybe they're still unresponsive, we do need to put them in the recovery position. You can take a look at the person in that photo. That is what the recovery position looks like. We put them in this position to maintain an open airway, prevent them from choking on vomit. That is one of the effects sometimes. Narcan can cause someone who's maybe been chronically using opiates for a while to go into a withdrawal, and that causes GI problems. So sometimes the person can vomit. We want to make sure that they're not going to choke on that. You want to put the one of the arms underneath the head to make sure that their hand is or their head is supported, with the knee keeping the person from rolling over onto their stomach completely. We obviously want to stay with the person and monitor breathing until EMTs or other services are able to arrive. It's just crucial we get them to medical professionals because, like we said, this is only a temporary blocking of the opiates in someone's system. So if they have taken a huge amount of opiates, sure, we're getting them out of the overdose, but that original level of opiates is still in their system and it's just waiting for the Narcan to wear off. Important to get them with medical professionals. What are some things we should expect from the person who we administer the Narcan to? Each person's going to react a little bit differently, but by and large, the biggest reaction is confusion. Folks are going to wake up simply confused or disoriented. As we like to say, put very simply, Narcan is going to put a person into very uncomfortable opiate withdrawals almost immediately. So what are those symptoms? Like we said, the nausea, the GI issues, waves of panic and anxiety, hot and cold flashes, heavy perspiration, muscle cramps, shivering and tremors. A lot of these can come on at the very rapid onset once this stuff starts to block the opiates. It can be intense enough to make a person want to leave and use again. Now, this is where we talk about cyclical overdoses. So let's say I'm somebody who has been in an overdose and it's been reversed with Narcan. I immediately feel terrible, right? I'm in these withdrawals. The only way I know to not feel sick like this is to go and use some more. And sometimes that's what happens. The person gets up and leaves. They use more. When that dose of Narcan wears off, now they have double the amount of opiates in their system, and it can cause this kind of chain reaction of overdoses. So that's again why it's important to get them to medical professionals to try to get them to understand, hey, we understand you feel terrible. Every minute feels like an hour right now, but we need to make sure that you know this is a very temporary feeling. So let's not use anymore. Let's just let this wear off and kind of sit through the uncomfortable feelings for a little bit. How do we know if it's working? All that stuff I mentioned earlier is going to kind of reverse. So the breathing patterns are going to return to normal versus that irregular or very, very slowed breathing. Pulse will be present, returning to normal as blood pressure gets back. That blue and gray skin around the extremities and the lips are going to return to a regular color. That person's going to regain consciousness, hopefully. But important to note, just when they regain consciousness, that doesn't mean that the overdose is finished, quote unquote. It's still important to get them in front of medical professionals. Am I covered by law? This is important to talk about, and I won't go too deep into the details. But the reason we talk about legality is because there is sometimes fear that if somebody reverses an overdose in public, if something adverse happens, are they responsible criminally or civilly? You are covered by Good Samaritan laws. If a person calls 911 or takes someone to an ER for an overdose, both the person seeking emergency help and the person overdosing are protected from charges of prosecution for felony possession of prescription opiates of fewer than 40 grams, fewer than 3 grams of heroin, 3 grams of morphine, and there's a whole lot of others. I suggest if you're interested, check those laws online. But that is for people who maybe you're using together. One of the people overdoses, the other person doesn't want to get arrested, and so they sometimes like won't even call for EMTs, or maybe they'll just throw them out of a car at an ER. They are covered. Important to note that. Same thing with civilly. If you're a non-medical professional, but it's also medical professionals too that are covered, depending on the situation. But if I'm just a regular community member and I come across an overdose, let's say in a public park, I administer naloxone, that person's overdose is reversed. Down the line, you are not going to be liable for any civil or criminal liability. In case anyone comes back down the line and says, this person, when they were reviving me, it caused X, Y, or Z, so I'm taking them to civil court. Good faith attempt is going to cover you if you're trying to reverse an overdose that you come across in public. A few myths about fentanyl, important to bust these because sometimes these myths that take hold will keep someone from wanting to go and reverse an overdose. So the first one, myth number one, you can overdose by touching fentanyl. This is like the biggest myth about it. Fentanyl powder is not absorbed through the skin in that way. It's just not the way that it's synthesized, not the way it's created. So, touching a door handle that has a speck of fentanyl on it is not going to cause an overdose. Myth number two, same thing about fentanyl, but this time in the air. If fentanyl powder is somehow in the air, it can be inhaled, causing an overdose. Let's bust that fact too. It would take a large amount over a long period of time to have any impact, considered very highly unlikely. And myth number three, Narcan cannot reverse a fentanyl overdose. Narcan can reverse any opioid overdose, including fentanyl and including other synthetics that are like analogs of fentanyl. These newer things that are created in labs. As long as it behaves and acts like an opioid, Narcan can touch a lot of it. So important to bust these myths. If I'm somebody that just sees news articles of, let's say, a school teacher touched a doorknob that had a few specks of fentanyl in it, they went into an overdose, they had to get rushed to the ER. If I see those stories and I think, if I come across somebody overdosed in public, I don't want to touch them. Right? I don't want to reverse an overdose. I don't go anywhere near them because just touching them can cause my own overdose. That stuff doesn't work like that. So remember and try to bust these myths in your own life because we don't want someone to feel like they can't reverse an overdose due to fear of these things. A couple of the drug trends we see, like I said, synthetic opioids, so fentanyl and similar synthetics that are like magnitude stronger than traditional opiates and can be manufactured very cheaply in labs. The other one is xylazine, which has been around for a little bit, but that's an animal tranquilizer that's been added to illicit drug supply to increase the strength of the opiate. So these are not opioids, xylazine and other tranquilizers. So Narcan will not specifically reverse any type of OD effects for xylazine. However, it will still touch the fentanyl or other synthetic opioids that maybe is mixed with the xylazine. One really kind of sketchy and scary thing about xylazine is over time, prolonged use can and will cause severe skin ulcers on people's bodies, regardless of the route of administration. So it doesn't matter if they're snorting it, if they're smoking it, if they're intravenously using it, it causes these skin ulcers, sometimes getting so bad that it requires amputation. So this is an adulterant we definitely have been keeping our eyes on over the past couple of years. If you or somebody you know need Narcan, the DuPage ROSC has got a number of free Narcan boxes at community partner sites. So you can see here, this is the list that are currently up. There is a full list of Narcan pickup sites on hopedupage.org, but as you can see, we have them everywhere from social services to libraries to police departments to treatment centers. It's important for our organization to make sure that Narcan is free, that it's easy to access, and that you can remain anonymous if you want to access it. I should also note that in a pinch, Narcan is available over the counter, so you can go and pick it up at your local Walgreens or CVS. But a box containing 2 single-use doses of Narcan can cost anywhere around $45 a box. So the people who often need this stuff the most do not have $45 to spend on Narcan. So please visit one of these places. You can pick up as much as you need completely for free, and you can remain anonymous while doing it. Because believe it or not, there is still stigmas attached to requesting Narcan and other harm reduction materials. Thank you for hanging out during this short and sweet Narcan training. If you have any questions, you can always hit us up on Facebook or on our website, dupagerosc.org. Glad you're brushed up on this. We always hope you don't need to use this stuff, but we're glad you'll have it with you in case you come across somebody. So thank you again.